G'day everybody, Geoff Baldwin here. I'm sitting here talking to my mate Clancy Larrative, and we were having a discussion about price ranging, as people tend to refer to it. However, in Remax we refer to it as buyer feedback ranging because it's designed to do just that, and that is get feedback from the buyers. So this is going to be rough as guts, unplugged, and the good part about it is it's going to cost you nothing. So we'll post this up for people to have a look at, so you've got a better understanding, hopefully, of the power of buyer feedback ranging. So let me talk to you first of all about pricing a property to sell. The first thing I'd like to say is real estate agents shouldn't be pricing properties because agents really don't know that much about what a property is going to sell for. The person who makes the decision on what property is going to sell for is the person who writes the cheque, and that is the buyer. Now, just to test that, I'll ask you this question. If a property is on the market and no one knows the price, however, the seller and the agent think it's worth about, say, $1 million, what could be the variation in price? If three people come through the door, didn't know the price, all loved the property and decided to put an offering on it, what could the range of offers be? Probably the lower end, it could be as low as $700,000. At the top end, the heart buyer might pay $1.2 million. So for $1 million property, you could have a variance in opinions from buyers of $500,000. So who is it for us as real estate agents to decide that we know exactly what a property will sell for? So we first of all say to agents, don't give people prices. Sit down with them, show them the evidence, show them what they're up against, show them what's sold, show them what's on the market now, and then from that, team up with them and come up with a strategy that's going to get them the best possible price for their property. Now, of course, as an agent, you can have some inkling of what you think the property will sell for, but how often are we wrong? How often are we wrong about the price that we think a property will sell for? Every now and again we get more, but quite often we don't get as much. The challenge, of course, is to get the buyer and the seller together so that they can actually have a discussion about the house, and so that the buyer can actually get an opportunity to fall in love with the house. Because people buy on emotion rather than price, don't they? How often do people come up with a budget and then once they see a house go, well, yeah, that's all I could afford, but I'm going to find a little bit more because I actually love this property. Now, to go back a little bit further, say the property is worth $1 million. The person that's going to eventually pay $1 million, where do they start off looking? They may start off looking as low as $800,000. So when they first get out, you have to get the idea or the inkling to buy a property, they think, well, we're going to buy our dream property with all those things that we need for $800,000. Little do they know that once they get into the market, they're going to be a little bit disappointed at what they see for $800,000, because the property that they're looking to buy is $1 million property. Now, if the property is worth $1 million, what's the seller want to put on it for an asking price? If they're going to put a fixed price on it and you think it's worth $1 million, what are they going to tell you to put on the property to take into account negotiation, if you like, or just to make sure they don't sell it too cheap? It's not unusual for $1 million property to initially go onto the market for what, 1.2, certainly 1.1 million, and more often probably 1.15 or 1.2 million. So what we have is a situation here where you've got a buyer looking to buy a property at $800,000, not realising that over time they're going to realise they're not going to get what they want and have to pay more, and you've got a seller who's pricing their property 10-15% above what it's worth. So you've got a gap in this situation of $400,000. Now let's say that was a $500,000 property. Say the property is worth $500,000, $510,000. You'd have a situation where you've got a buyer that starts looking at $460,000 and a seller who says, well, if my property is worth $500,000, $510,000, then I'm going to ask, I want you, Mr. Agent, to ask a price of, say, $540,000. So hence we've got a buyer at $460,000 is likely to eventually pay $500,000, $510,000 because they don't see something they like until they're up their price, and you've got a seller who's unrealistically looking to ask a price of $540,000. In that case, an $80,000 gap. So what's the chances? What's the chances of that buyer circling that property in the paper and actually going to the home open or ringing up the agent to go and have a look? It's a challenge that we're faced with day in and day out with thousands and thousands of listings, especially in a tougher market, because people always want to get a bit more than what their property is worth, and buyers always think they're going to pay less than what they eventually pay. Now, it also needs to keep in mind that people buy from emotion. Every purchase has an emotional drive, and there's two things. First of all, if we say this line again here is a line of normality, so this is where things are normal, People buy either to get from pain back to normal or from normal to pleasure. I think if you think about that, you'll agree with it. Now, I've often asked people to tell me a buying decision that isn't emotional. And I remember once somebody said toilet paper, and I said, well, if you're sitting on the toilet and you don't have any toilet paper, then certainly buying toilet paper is an emotional decision, isn't it? Everything we do has some emotion attached to it, either to get in that situation from pain back to pleasure, or in the case of buying a house, it's usually to get from a livable, normal situation to a more pleasurable situation, especially if you're buying up, or even if you're just buying your first house. You can survive in a rental property, but you're going out there to buy yourself a property to get to a better standard in your life. Regardless, the thing to remember is that the biggest drive is emotion. Now, for people to be able to get emotionally involved with a property, they have to first see that property. And that's the most important point that I make. Now, people argue that auction is an example of getting people to see a property before they start arguing about price, and I'd agree with that. I think a carefully constructed and carried out auction is a fantastic way to sell a property. What isn't a fantastic way to sell a property is to stick a price on it that's above what the expectation is, and then wait for people to come along and make an offer. Because one of the most common asked questions by interested buyers is what? The question is, Mr. Agent, how long has it been on the market? Now, of course, we can't be dishonest about that. They may already know the answer to the question. It may have been on the internet for the last 3 months, 2 months, or even 4 weeks. But what I do know is after a property's been on the market for 5 or 6 weeks, it's starting to stale. The argument is that the optimum time to get the best price for a property is in the first 30 to 42 days. After that, you're in trouble. And people ask that question, how long has a property been on the market, for what particular reason? They ask that question because they want to hear that it's been on for 3 months. Why do they want to hear it's been on for 3 months? So that they can negotiate the price a lot more harshly. So, David Knox, who's a fantastic trainer, says in his training, if you're going to overprice your property, my advice is don't do it in the first couple of weeks. Which is a little bit cynical, but it's true, isn't it? You're better to come onto the market at the right price so that you can attract buyers, get that big impact of initial buying interest, and have some competition and sell the property. So to do that, I'd like to, in the next session, discuss buyer feedback ranging and how that's worked for me since 1992. Thank you.